Talk the Talk podcast. Welcome.
We've gathered quite a stack of sources on this, focusing on what people quickly started calling the billionaire battle. This was back in June 2025.
That's right. And what we're talking about here is this really dramatic public fight that just blew up between Elon Musk and President Donald Trump.
Yeah, an explosive rupture, really, between guys who used to be allies. It really captured everyone's attention.
It did. It started over policy, sure,
Mhm.
but looking at the sources, it spun out into something much more personal and pretty volatile.
So our mission today in this deep dive is to walk you through this whole high-stakes showdown. We'll trace the timeline based on the sources, look at the key clashes.
Let's sort of unpack what it all might mean, the potential implications, right?
Exactly. And why should you care about, another spat between powerful people?
Well, because this one, as the sources really lay out, tells you a lot about power today, how fast alliances can just evaporate.
And how things can escalate, especially online in the digital age.
Yeah, and the ripples from something like this.
Yeah.
Between these kinds of figures, it can impact politics, tech, business, in ways we might not even fully grasp yet.
Okay, let's get into it then. Where did this all start? Because, as the sources show, it wasn't always this bad between Musk and Trump.
No, definitely not. There was a time they seemed quite aligned. But the friction really started simmering late May, early June 2025.
And there's some important background here the sources mention. Musk had been involved with the administration previously.
That's key context, yeah. He was part of Trump's Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, they called it.
Yeah.
But he'd stepped down not long before this whole thing ignited.
Right, which feeds into some of the later accusations we'll get to.
Exactly, that idea of ingratitude.
So the spark, the initial trigger that the sources point to, was President Trump's one big, beautiful bill act, big piece of legislation.
And Musk's reaction was, well, it wasn't quiet. He went straight to X, Twitter, and just hammered it.
Right.
Very publicly.
He didn't hold back. The language he used, it's right there in the source material. Things like a disgusting abomination.
Yeah, and a massive, outrageous, pork-filled congressional spending bill. That's not just disagreement.
No, that's throwing down the gauntlet. His main argument, though, was about the debt, right?
Pretty much. His core point, repeated in his posts, was that this bill would just irresponsibly balloon the national debt. A fiscal conservative argument, essentially.
And he wasn't just tweeting his opinion into the void. He was trying to get people moving.
Right. There's that specific tweet the sources highlight. This big, beautiful bill is a disgrace. A mountain of pork and debt. Shame on those who voted for it. Call your reps. Hashtag fiscal responsibility.
So he's actively rallying opposition using his platform.
Which, when you're talking about the president's signature bill,
Mm-hmm.
that's a significant move.
Mm-hmm.
Takes things from simmering to, well, boiling pretty fast.
It really does. That boiling point, the moment it spilled over into this direct public clash, that was Thursday, June 5th, this is where the sources show it just exploded.
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting. So, President Trump's first public reaction. According to the sources, he expressed disappointment.
But he didn't just leave it there. He framed it very specifically.
Right. He suggested Musk knew the bill inside out because of his DOGE role, knew the inner workings, was the phrase.
And Trump's angle was that Musk only flipped out after certain parts were removed, specifically provisions related to EV subsidies.
Subsidies that obviously helped Tesla. So the implication was pretty clear. Musk's criticism wasn't principle, it was self-interest.
And didn't Trump also sort of hint at something else?
Yeah, the sources mentioned he floated the idea that maybe Musk had Trump derangement syndrome after leaving the administration. Bit of a jab there.
We've got some direct quotes from Trump that day. During a press conference, he said, I'm very disappointed because Elon knew the inner workings of this bill better than almost anybody sitting here. All of a sudden, he had a problem.
And then on Truth Social, he really leaned in. Elon was wearing thin. I asked him to leave. I took away his EV mandate that he knew for months I was going to do. And he just went crazy. Why?
Wow. Okay. So that's Trump hitting back hard. How did Musk take that?
Musk fired back almost instantly on X. He just flat out dismissed the idea that this was about EV subsidies. No backing down.
And he threw his own accusation back, didn't he?
Oh, yeah. He accused Trump of ingratitude.
Yeah.
And then he dropped what he himself called the really big bomb.
Which was?
He tweeted, and this is quite something, without me, Trump would have lost the election. Dems would control the House and the Republicans would be 51-49 in the Senate. Such ingratitude, basically claiming he was the reason for Trump's wins.
Okay, that's a huge claim. But then came the really explosive part the sources focus on.
The Epstein Files tweet.
Yeah.
Musk tweeted directly at Trump, "Real Donald Trump is in the Epstein Files. That is the real reason they have not been made public. Have a nice day, DJT." And it's really, really important to stress here, as the sources do, this was an allegation made with zero evidence provided. The White House condemned it immediately. It was just thrown out there.
A major escalation. And while all this was happening, Musk was doing other things too, right? Not just tweeting at Trump.
No, he was talking about needing a new political party. Even reposted someone else's tweet calling for Trump's impeachment, which is quite a statement.
And he ran that poll too.
That's right. Asked his followers, is it time to create a new political party in America that actually represents the 80% in the middle? Yes or no? Testing the waters very publicly.
So Musk unleashes this barrage, ingratitude, election claims, the Epstein tweet, talk of new parties. How did Trump respond to that level of escalation?
Trump escalated again, but in a different direction. He went from personal attacks to hinting at using government power against Musk's businesses.
The contracts and subsidies.
Exactly. He suggested he'd consider cutting off government contracts and subsidies for SpaceX and Tesla.
And he put that on Truth Social pretty bluntly. What was the wording?
It read, "The easiest way to save money in our budget, billions and billions of dollars, is to terminate Elon's governmental subsidies and contracts." I was always surprised that Biden didn't do it, directly linking the feud to those government ties.
That's a serious threat. And Musk's first reaction was pretty dramatic itself.
It really was. Sources caught his sort of initial shocked response. He tweeted that SpaceX would start decommissioning its Dragon spacecraft immediately.
The one NASA depends on for astronauts to the space station?
The very same. His tweet said, "In light of the president's statement about cancellation of my government contracts, SpaceX will begin decommissioning its Dragon spacecraft immediately." A huge threat, basically holding a critical program hostage.
But crucially, he walked that back pretty quickly, didn't he?
Yes, that's important. The sources note he quickly reversed course. Tweeted later something like, "Good advice. Okay, we won't decommission Dragon." So the threat was made in the heat of the moment, but he pulled back fast on that specific action.
Okay, so Thursday was just peak chaos. What happened on Friday, June 6th? Did things settle down?
A bit, yeah. The sources indicate the intensity definitely dropped on Friday. The public back and forth wasn't nearly as fierce, but, the tension was obviously still there.
How did Trump handle it on Friday?
His tone shifted. He mostly avoided direct attacks on Musk, said he was busy with other things, even wished Musk well.
But he didn't totally drop the contract issue, did he?
No, there was that caveat. He repeated he'd take a look at the subsidies, but added the qualifier, "only if it's fair."
What was the quote on that?
Speaking from Air Force One, sources quote him saying, "He's got a lot of money, he gets a lot of subsidies, so we'll take a look at that." So, still there, but much softer than terminate.
And what about Musk on Friday? What was he focused on?
Musk seemed to keep pushing his new political party idea. He pointed to his poll results from Thursday as evidence people wanted it.
He tweeted about the poll.
Yep. Said something like, "The people have spoken. A new political party is needed. And exactly 80% of people agree this is fate." Kind of framing it as destiny.
And then there were those small signs of maybe a slight thaw at the end of the day.
Yeah, tiny gestures. Like when Musk saw the video of Trump saying he'd review subsidies if it's fair, Musk just tweeted back, "Fair enough." Not exactly friendly, but an acknowledgement.
And then wishing Trump well.
Right. Later, in response to a Trump video, Musk tweeted, "Likewise." Seemed like a direct response to Trump wishing him well earlier. So definitely a step back from the brink compared to Thursday.
Okay, so we've walked through the blow by blow. Now the big question, what does it all mean? What are the broader implications here that the sources dig into?
Right, because this isn't just gossip. The sources suggest this feud has real potential consequences for politics, for tech, for business.
What's the immediate outlook then? Truce. Lasting peace.
The analysis points towards a shaky truce, probably volatile, a real detente, a true burying of the hatchet. Unlikely, given their personalities, their competing interests.
Yeah, feels like it could flare up again.
Exactly. They might be civil publicly for stretches, but the sources suggest that underlying trust, or whatever was there, is likely gone. So expect ongoing strain.
What about that threat to cut contracts? SpaceX, Starlink.
Yeah.
How realistic is that? It seems complicated.
Extremely complicated. The sources really emphasize the national security side of things. NASA needs SpaceX for the ISS right now. Starlink plays strategic roles. Fully cutting ties isn't like flipping a switch. It would be messy, legally and strategically.
So outright cancellation is probably off the table.
It's seen as less likely than, say, increased scrutiny, making new contracts harder to get, maybe looking closer at existing ones. But termination, that's a big, legally complex step the sources think the administration would be cautious about.
And Musk's political clout. Has this damaged his standing?
The analysis suggests, yeah, probably. Especially within the Trump camp and maybe the wider Republican Party, even if he's donated money or advised informally before. This kind of public war isn't how allies typically operate. It likely erodes trust and influence.
Makes sense. What about the new party idea he was floating? Any legs there?
Sources treat it as very speculative for now. Could he fund it? Sure. Could it attract some voters? Maybe. But his approach here, using his platform and wall so aggressively against critics, might actually make both parties pretty wary of him as a reliable political force. It's a wild card, but success is far from guaranteed.
And just the public nature of it all. Both these guys seem to thrive on that attention.
That's a huge factor, the sources point out. They both use social media as a primary communication tool, a stage. So even if the specific fight cools down, the potential for future public clashes on their platforms, it seems pretty high.
So bottom line, that bromance we heard about earlier seems pretty broken.
That's the strong suggestion from the sources. Whatever camaraderie existed, it seems genuinely fractured. They might find ways to work together on specific things if interests align, but that easy alliance, probably gone. A long-term strain seems much more likely.
So wrapping this deep dive up, the big takeaway from the sources on this June 2025 Musk-Trump conflict seems to be, it's a really stark example of how fast political alliances can just shatter, especially with big personalities, big money, and clashing interests playing out online.
And it leaves a lot of uncertainty, as the source material notes. Is this a permanent break? Or just another crazy chapter in a very complex relationship? We don't really know yet.
What is clear, though, is that the fallout keeps rippling through Washington, through Silicon Valley, through boardrooms.
Yeah, so maybe the final thought to leave you with, drawing on these themes, is this. What does this kind of very public, very digital feud between these two powerful, sort of unconventional figures tell us about political power and influence today? How does this change the game for alliances and arguments when personal brands and online platforms are just so central?
Something to definitely think about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.